This is John, and today we're going to talk about FSHD and what his experience has been with this condition. Can you describe the medical condition that you have?
Yeah, I'm just going to go off my little cheat sheet here. Uh, Facioscapulohumeral Muscular Dystrophy, which is a genetic muscle disorder. And at the time, they believed, when it was first diagnosed, they thought it was face, shoulder blades, and upper arms. Still, they claim that's the most commonly affected, but as it turns out, it affects a lot more of the muscles in the body than just that. It's caused by a genetic mutation on chromosome number 4. And what happens is this mutation leads to the production of an abnormal protein, which is known as DUX4. So when you hear people talk about FSH, that's the key term there. That's what damages muscle cells.
Do you have any, because you talk about it being genetic, is there anybody that you know in your family that has any kind of muscular dystrophy?
Yeah, the way it progressed was they traced it back as far as my maternal grandfather who had it. He did not know what he had. They just weren't into any genetics or any muscular diseases back there. But they knew that he was having problems like would cut hair, and he got to the point where he couldn't get the scissors up to cut people's hair anymore. And they just noticed things like the winging of the scapula or whatever. He had 4 daughters, 2 of which had sons that had the muscular dystrophy. Um, but with that said, that's only what is known. Was there anybody else on my cousin's side that had it? Any of his siblings? Because there was 3. There's a 50-50 chance of having this because it's defined as genetically autosomal dominant, which basically means you got a 50-50 chance of having it or not. So my cousin had it, and then I have it, but we also suspect my sister has it. She refuses to do testing or whatever. So we're watching kind of her physical stature and her mobility. And boy, she moves around a lot like me. So don't know about her, but it could be in our case of the family that both of us got it. But we know for sure that I have.
All right. So, getting into the nitty gritty, when were you diagnosed with this condition and how did that look?
I was diagnosed when I was 17. My mother, what really kind of brought it on was we first started seeing symptoms when I was 10. And so she would see that I had the winging of my right shoulder blade a little bit. She noticed that I didn't stand upright, that my shoulders slumped forward. And so she would yell at me and she would say, come on, keep your shoulders back. And I would try and I couldn't do it. And so we did that for a lot of years, and she'd get mad at me. And finally, she put me in a corner facing outward, and she pushed my shoulder muscles back. She said, "Now this is how you're supposed to stand. So I want you to do that." As soon as she let go, my shoulders slumped back forward. I was a rebellious kid. She was a mom with anxiety. We butted heads all the time. She thought I was doing this on purpose, just kind of to spite her. But at that moment, it kind of dawned on her that maybe there was something else. So that's when I went to my family physician, who sent me to a neurologist in Kentucky, and they did multiple tests, manual muscle testing. They did functional muscle testing. They actually did EMGs, and they would send shocks down my arms and legs and measure speed of pulses and such. And from that, Dr. Clark in Kentucky said, "Yeah, this is what we suspect." So they sent me back home. Good Samaritan Hospital in Dayton did surgery. They did a muscle biopsy, took part of the muscle in my right arm, part in my lower calf, and analyzed it and said, "Yeah, that's exactly what you've got." So at that point, then we met with a geneticist who then basically told us what they believed at the time. Some of the information, what we got, was erroneous, but just because they didn't know any better at that time. They diagnosed it as X-linked recessive, which means females are carriers and males are affected. But as it turned out, it's really autosomal dominant. So some of the information we got at the time was really good, really insightful, and then some of it they just didn't know, and they were giving out bad information at the time.
So, were your symptoms from the time you were 10 to the time that you got diagnosed, was there a change in your symptoms just
Yeah.
in that time?
Yeah. And, no one knows, because what we do as human beings is when we're unable to do something, we compensate, but we don't even realize we're compensating. So, for example, for me, my right side is affected most, whereas my cousin, his left side is affected most. So, when I would reach for things with my right arm up on the shelf, I couldn't do it, but I never questioned that in my mind. I would just use my left arm and left hand, and I would get up and get things. So, we don't really know all what was changing over time, because I was unconsciously kind of compensating for what was happening. But there were those changes, and they saw them. My mom saw them, but again, she just didn't click with her, which is unfortunate, because of all the headbutting that we had through the years. Then when I was diagnosed, she carried an incredible amount of guilt, because she realized at that time that, oh wow, he really did have something. I was really getting mad at him, and it wasn't his fault. And actually, she took that fault as internal, because I had it and I gave it to my son. So I feel guilty about even propagating the disease.
All right. So, flash forward, you are the ripe old age of 29 currently. What what changes have you seen in your symptoms since you were diagnosed? What does that look like now?
Well, when I was diagnosed at 17, I didn't really take it serious. It just didn't seem to be affecting me that much. And we wanted to know, at the time, I was seriously dating my wife, Terry, and we were looking at it from a genetic standpoint and having children. But other than that, it just didn't seem to affect me much. And I didn't take it serious. But when I hit 32 years of age, that's when the dominoes were starting to fall in my physical abilities. So anything that was happening through that time, I couldn't even tell you, because I just didn't see anything. But do you want me to expound on the turning point? Okay.
Sure.
So I was preparing for a backpacking trip. I was going to backpack across the Grand Canyon and back, and I had done the trip before. And basically what I do is I start 9 months in advance to prepare. And one of the things I would do is at lunch at work, they had this accelerated landing runway, and it just really went steep quick. And so I would walk to the top and back down and top and back down, and it really helped prepare me. And I was also doing other stuff, but I did that every day at work to prepare. And I started having some real severe chest pains. Well, that concerned me. Why am I having chest pain? So I went to my family physician, who did a stress test, which came back normal. He said, you're good to go on the trip. Then I went on the trip. You're basically dropping a mile in elevation that first day, and my chest was just really hurting. And I was kind of concerned, because how do you get out of a situation like that? And I've never had that problem before. The second day, coming halfway out, the pain was just horrific. It was just really bad. And so I decided day number 3, I was just going to get up super early. I didn't want to inconvenience the other 3 people in my group. And I was just going to strike out on my own. But they were smart, and then you're not supposed to hike on your own. So one of the other people hiked with me, and I was just really pushing it. And I was thinking stupid thoughts like, if this is a heart attack, I'm going to push myself so hard, I'll just at least having a heart attack, at least I'll know. And you have stupid thoughts like that. But I was just getting super weak, and the pain in my chest was so bad, I was crying, had tears coming down my cheeks. And I finally, within I'm going to say 2 miles of the rim, I just had to stop. I couldn't go any further. And I'm just sitting there kind of in despair. And of course, everybody on the trail is like, can I help you? Is there something I can do? And I'm just embarrassed, and I really don't want anybody talking to me. And I just kind of wave them off. And then the other part of my group caught up, one of which was my third Eagle Scout. And he took the shoulder straps of my backpack, opened them up the whole way, put it over top his backpack, and walked out with both backpacks to the rim. Just, pretty phenomenal. And we're still pretty close friends even today. So I basically just drugged myself to those last 2 miles and got to the rim. And then I have to go a mile to go to the campsite. And there was just this little itty bitty rise in that mile trail. And I couldn't do it. I was just so whipped. My shoulders and chest and everything was just, I was just hurting so bad. Make a long story a little shorter. Got to the campground. I told them to continue on the trip the next day. I took a bus back to the other side and waited for them. When I got home, my family physician ran an arsenal of tests, pulmonary function test, esophagus test, total upper GI. They even did a heart cath. They just did everything they could think of. And everything came back negative. Everything was good. So they took me, sent me to my fasciatrist, who I was seeing for muscular dystrophy. And he said, oh yeah, I know what's happening here. So you're breathing hard and your chest muscles are stretching and coming back. Your backpack is pulling your shoulders back. And he said, I'm sorry, this is now going to be an R-rated video. He said, you are ripping the shit out of your chest muscles. And so then he laid me on the table. Terry was there. He'd put a needle in my chest, wiggle it, and it hurt. He put a needle in my chest, wiggle it, it hurt. Put a needle in, wiggle it. Oh my gosh, I about came off the table. He said, that's where you rip muscles. So he'd inject steroids. And he did that over probably about a 20-minute time frame, just injecting steroids to do some healing. And the most important takeaway, which has kind of ruled my entire life, was, John, you can do whatever you want to do, but there's going to be consequences you're going to suffer. And you have to decide how bad you want it and how much you want to suffer. Or you can live your life kind of like just trying to stay mobile, but don't push yourself too hard. And even then you're going to have a recovery period from some of that. But he's right. I have to just decide how bad I want something, how bad I want to cover it up so that people don't know, so that I can continue to do things. But it was the important turning point for me, because it was then that I just started losing stuff on a regular basis. So the following year I tried backpacking, it didn't work out, had the same problems, had to drop it. Eventually I had to drop rock climbing, just couldn't do it anymore. Caving, swimming, scuba diving, all that stuff. They just, activities as years went on, I just started losing more and more stuff because I just didn't have the ability to do it. Sometimes I would push it. I was with John on I guess that was a snorkeling trip. That wasn't a scuba trip, I'd been a snorkeling trip. And my doctor didn't even put that I had muscular dystrophy on my form. He was trying to work with me too. And I would go down there and I'd do the swim test and I'd fool them. And if they knew what my diagnosis was, they would never let me do the stuff I was doing. So even though I was still wrestling with a lot of the changes at the time, I was still trying to cover it up so I could still push that envelope, knowing that in years to come, all that would be gone. So these were my last chances to grab a hold of things, even though I was having these pretty wicked side effects from all this.
So your main symptom is muscle weakness. Do you have any other symptoms, or is that just, it's muscular dystrophy, so that's kind of the key.
It's kind of a designer disease that you can go from person to person and you'll see differences. There is some consistency, but there's some things like, for example, I can smile, but a lot of people with FSH can't smile. It's not there. And to communicate with somebody and you tell a joke and then you're not smiling or whatever, it's a hard misread. People are really big on visual cues. So they will have mouth weakness to the point they can't smile, they can't blow up a balloon, they can't drink from a straw. But that stuff doesn't hit me very much. But I have a lot of weakness in my chest, in my shoulders, in my upper arms, now into my hands, my chest, my abdomen, my lower back, my upper legs, and then some down into my feet. Some FSH people lose so much muscle in their feet, they have what's called foot drop, so they can't even pick their feet up when they walk, so they have to put braces, AFOs on them to be able to walk without dragging their feet. I'm sorry, did I get off on the wrong tangent there?
No, it's good.
So, and then also is kind of interesting is And there was some fallacy in the beginning, but we kind of eventually ran it to ground. Does it affect respiratory muscles? And they said originally, no, it does not, but yes, it does. And I've got a weak right diaphragm where it's killed a lot of the muscles in there, such that when I go horizontal, I go pretty dangerously low on oxygen and high on carbon dioxide, which means at night I do a BiPAP, which does forced air when I breathe in and does nothing when I breathe out, which is different from a CPAP. Also, it affects heart. They always said, no, it doesn't affect your heart, and it doesn't affect the heart muscles themselves. But in my case, the muscles in my chest are dying, and the muscles are there to support your heart. So then when they die, they pull away. And so when your heart has a bigger space, then it begins to act like a balloon and it gets bigger. And what can eventually happen is the heart will rupture. So they keep an eye on that distance. I'm getting pretty close. Once I hit that gap distance, then they'll have to do open heart surgery, come in and put in materials that will basically hold the heart in place and contain the heart. Also, I don't have the problem, but some FSH people will have problems with retina and also with hearing. So that, fortunately, I haven't been had any of those problems, but those are also typical of FSH as well.
So it sounds like this has gotten, well, I guess maybe I should ask the question. Has this gotten worse over time, and how much do you attribute that to the progression of the disease versus aging, just in general?
Yeah, and it's hard, but with what they do is they do the muscle tests every time I go in. So, they'll ask me to raise my toes or ask me to raise my legs, and they're pressing against it, raising arms, fingers, all that stuff. And they measure that stuff and they let you know over time kind of where you're at. And I've seen just that typical progression over time where I'm losing. So you could say, you're getting older, but I'm losing it at such a fast pace that at times it's a little scary, because now I'm to the point where I'm catching myself before I fall. And I'm friends with a large group of FSH people on Facebook. And so I kind of throw that out, and they said, okay, that's where you are today. In a year, you're not going to catch yourself. You're going down. You're going to have falls all year long. And so you have to kind of protect yourself so that you don't do things like break a hip or whatever. You got to start moving with support. I've got a full height walker, so I can actually get up and walk upright. Part of the problem of the side effects of the disease is you would think it's scoliosis, but it's not the disease, but it is actually the same thing. It's curvature of the spine. So because I can no longer stand and walk upright, then now my spine is going into a permanent curve because of that. So I have to use, like I say, an upright walker or use a wheelchair or whatever to kind of compensate and slow that down from happening. So I'm seeing a lot of things that are not attributed to normal aging that we do see with the disease. My cousin died when he was 63, and it used to be we were in contact. Terry was in contact with his wife, and he was running a progression identical to mine, and he was older than I was, so we could see where I was going to be based on his progression. When he passed away, of course, now we've kind of lost that, unfortunately, but I would guess with the degradation in the muscles that I'm seeing that, like right now, I'm walking maybe 150 feet, and even that is a pretty big challenge. So I predict sometime in the next couple of years, I'll become probably almost a full-time wheelchair user. They say that's only like 20% of FSH people that will be in a wheelchair. I don't know if the statistic is accurate, but yeah, it is. It affects the abdomen muscles so that you can't stand upright to walk, and then the leg muscles, and eventually it's, like I say, it's like a series of dominoes. Once you lose enough, then you're done, and anything beyond that is a kind of a struggle.
Well, we're going to get you the sweetest bedazzled hover round anybody's ever seen. That'd be great.
Yeah, I got a track chair story, but we'll tell that another time. That would have been pretty sweet.
All right, so obviously this progression has made you more weak. Have there been any treatments that you have had or management of the symptoms in the past that have helped?
Um, the only thing we can do is make me comfortable, is treat the pain. There's really not a whole lot you can do for the fatigue. They tell me that I need to remain as mobile as possible. If not, that's muscle atrophy and loss of range of motion. So I have to make sure I can stay as active as I can safely be active, light aerobics, those sorts of things. On the drug side, ibuprofen is kind of like a wonder drug. If I could do ibuprofen 3,200 milligrams a day, I'd be a happy guy, but that would toast my kidneys and other stuff. So I have to temper the usage of that. OSU has me on gabapentin. I got as high as 4,000 milligrams. I think 4,800 is the legal limit. So I was kind of pushing the envelope on that one. It wasn't doing enough. So then my family physician, who's been very supportive, sent me to a pain management clinic, and they started me on tramadol, which is an opioid, and that takes off a pretty good edge off of it as well. I've puttered around with things like yoga, essential oils, CBD stuff, and I've never had any success with anything else. So my go-to is always the ibuprofen, the gabapentin, and the tramadol. Ideally, you'd like to deal with it in other ways if possible, but I've never had success with anything else.
Do you feel like you have side effects from using that, even though you feel like it's the best treatment?
Not with the ibuprofen, other than they tell me that my blood platelet count is low, actually outside the range, which is why when I bleed, it's hard for me to stop. And that could be because of the ibuprofen I take. There's no proof of that. The tramadol causes constipation. What a joy that is. So the only way to beat that is to stay somewhat mobile. You got to move to get it to move, and then to stay well hydrated. And I find if I can do those two things, it's not an issue. So that's really the only side effects I've ever encountered.
All right. Well, moving on. How has FSHD affected your work life, social life, hobbies? We know you have some amazing hobbies. How does that affect those?
In work, they were very supportive of me. I went to they got an ergonomics office, went there, they fitted me for a chair. The chair had great lumbar support. It had a great headrest support. Because I spend most of my time on the computer at work, then they were able to say, here, we got you a chair, good armrests. I was comfortable, and I could sit all day and I could feel comfortable. I love that chair. They also made sure that I had a handicapped parking space, so I didn't have to walk very far to get into the building. And if somebody took that space, there was a security specialist who saw that, and then they would open up their parking space to me. So they were very good to work with. They were open to any suggestions and whatever I needed. I told them also there might be days where I might be a little slower getting in, and because they have flex time, they said as long as you're putting in your 8 hours, you're good. So if I was having a really bad day, I might come in a little bit later, but then I just have to stay a little later. As far as social stuff, it is extremely hard to do social stuff when you have mobility problems. So we were just at a geocaching event. There's 20 people there, 50 people. There's 50 people there for the event, but they had something going on that night too. So the place was absolutely packed. And anytime I'm doing anything, I have concerns. Can I get to a seat? I can't stand, so that's off the table. So can I get to a seat? Where's the restroom? How far do I have to walk for the restroom? Where do I order my food? How can I even carry my food back to the table? So Terry was with me, and she's always real good to watch out for me. She would order the food, and she'd help me find a seat, and she's always scouting out where restrooms are and kind of help. But it kind of makes you say, I really don't want to go places because it is so hard. There was no handicap parking there. She had to drop me at the door because there's no way I could walk in from the back lot. When you encounter stuff like that, it makes you always question, how bad do I really want to go to something? And if I don't want to go to it that bad, I'm not going to go because it's just too much work. Eventually, when I'm in a wheelchair, then that's going to up things as well. So if I would have had a wheelchair that night, oh my gosh, how do I get in the door? Somebody's going to have to hold doors. How do I even get a seat with a wheelchair? How can I even get to the table? So a lot of stuff becomes very difficult in social situations. And I'll be one that I'll kind of like back off pretty quickly. With hobbies, again, I've let most of my hobbies go. I just don't have the physical ability to do them anymore. And that's kind of a sad thing. I was fighting for the longest time against getting a wheelchair. And they said, once you get it, you'll regret that. You'll say, why didn't I get it sooner? So eventually I gave up. They did get me a wheelchair at Ohio State University. I think there was very little cost after insurance, maybe no cost, I don't know. But anyways, got it. And they were right. Now I'm able to actually get out on bike trails and hard-packed dirt trails, as I'm a big geocacher. That provides me the ability to actually get out in the woods and get geocaches, and it spurs my mobility. As a matter of fact, because I want them so bad, I will push myself harder than I would push myself normally because I'm pursuing that. For some reason, that's kind of a trigger for me. So it's a good hobby because it kind of makes me get out there, makes me work harder than normally I might. I also spend a lot of time on the computer, so that's a big draw for me. I've got an Alaska Railroad website, so I work pretty hard on that. I've got friends that I communicate, email, that sort of thing. So that's also an easy one. We also do a lot of traveling, Terry and I, because I love to travel. I'm a travel junkie. But again, we have to research stuff pretty close, because how will I handle that over time? How do I get on an airplane? Or how do I get in and out of a car when I got my wheelchair? And is the park going to be accessible to wheelchair and that kind of stuff? So it does make you watch online what other people are able to do. So you kind of learn from their lessons. And there's a guy by the name of Corey Lee, and he's been in 53 countries so far. So he's got blogs and videos, and I can kind of watch those and say, wow, here are things that I can get out and do in the travel realm. So that's pretty helpful. Plus, there's some great websites for accessibility and travel.
So it sounds like you said planning ahead has become kind of a standard, and you've adjusted, it seems, to the progression of your FSHD. It sounds like you have a really amazing wife who supports you.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. When people ask, the common phrase is, you got to play the cards you've been dealt. I could lay on the couch at home in front of the TV and feel sorry for myself all day long, but instead I choose to play the cards that I've been dealt. And there's a lot of stuff that I want to do that I'm just unable to do. And I'm very thankful to have Terry, my wife. She's like a go-getter all the time. So if we're getting off the plane, she's kind of setting me off to the side. She's getting the luggage, she's getting the luggage cart. We're going to the rental car place. She's checking in the rental car, that kind of stuff. So she's really the only reason that I'm able to function in most of what I do. And if it's not Terry, then it might be friends. So geocaching, I've got some friends who have dedicated themselves, because they're geocachers too, but they've dedicated themselves to help me achieve my geocaching goals and going out on trips and that kind of stuff, because they realize my limitations, and they will always, like I say, they will always do the heavy lifting. There's only so much I can do. They know that. And then after that, they take up all the other stuff. So then I'm able to still do what I want to do. And like I say, it's with those friends. And then, of course, my wife, Terry, as well.
Perfect. We're going to get to the hairy stuff.
Bring it on.
How do you feel that your condition has affected your emotional and mental well-being?
I got to go to my notes here. As it turned out, I was like, oh, not at all. And then I started kind of looking at some of this stuff, and I realized that, oh my gosh, there's a lot that goes on that I guess you have to acknowledge that it's there, and sometimes you don't even know it's there. And so one of the things FSH has done for me is it made me kind of look within myself more than I normally would and listen to my body, the physical part, and listen to my mind, the emotional part. And yeah, I kind of like dug up some stuff there that with this, you have increased levels of anxiety and stress when I'm coping with the disability, when I'm coping with the pain, the fatigue, interactions with other people, dealing with the grief, the anger, the frustration, the hopelessness, the difficulty coping, knowing your body is only going to get worse. And you try to have a good positive attitude, but when you have chronic pain, and it's not severe pain, but when you have chronic pain all the time, grinding on you, it does get to you. One of the statements that I have held on to, Terry said at one point, John, you become a darker person. And when I heard that, I just thought, yeah, she's full of shit. And so then I got to thinking and I got to analyzing. And, I remember, I would joke a lot. And I'd be, kind of even doing practical jokes to people and laughing about stuff and doing goofy things. And a lot of that stuff went away. It evaporated because you are so focused with trying to get through your day. You're so focused with trying to beat some of the stuff that's in front of you that is going to be hard to do, and you got to give it your all. And so I think that all that pain, all that anxiety has indeed made me a darker person. She's right that a lot of that lightheartedness of me is gone because it's that grind from all that over time. I didn't see that coming, but I got to thinking about it a little bit. And then I think there was a lot that I was kind of uncovering that I think a lot of us with FSH don't even acknowledge, but others see. They see it in us.
So do you have any, obviously your hobbies and your social life, the limited might make up for that, but are there any other coping strategies? Because you said you didn't really notice this until somebody pointed it out to you. Do you think there's anything that you've done to cope with?
I've done some counseling. I got really nothing from it. That didn't seem to help me, and I didn't really pursue it because I just wasn't getting anything from it. I've done a little bit in support groups. Again, didn't do a thing for me, didn't seem to help me. If anything, it kind of scared me because then I could see people who were further in progression, and I would say, oh, that's going to be me, and I would get kind of rattled. And so that really wasn't my thing either, is doing a support group. However, doing an online support group with Facebook has been incredible. I can come up and say, wow, I, for the first time, dropped a glass. Actually, it was plastic, but a drinking glass. And I put that out there, and they're just like, yeah. And then they actually take pictures. I mean, some of them, their fingers have now gotten messed up, and they can't get them to straighten out or whatever. So it's kind of comforting to know when you throw that out there, they say, oh, yeah, we've seen that. And it may get worse, it may not. It just depends on the progression of the disease. But here are things you can do. For example, a good one was I have a huge drinking glass that my daughter Ann made for me for geocaching. I love it. I use it all the time. But now I can't even bring it up to take a drink out of it. But when we go to a cup that's got a handle on it, oh my gosh, now I can pick up heavier things. So, you try to, again, through those support groups, kind of pick up some of those tidbits. Yeah, I've got it down here. I thought about this last night. My wife and my dog, Tazzy, add greatly to my mental state because they're both, even though Tazzy's a dog, they're both upbeat and they're energetic and that kind of thing. And that kind of helps my positive attitude, as well as, like I said before, hobbies of geocaching, travel, doing my Alaska Railroad website. Those are the things that kind of bring me joy. I do love spending time with family. I love being with family. It is also an uplifting thing whenever I'm with family, especially knowing someone who has no family and communicates to me that he admires my life and he has some regrets that that never happened to him. So I guess, as bad as that sounds, it makes me feel very grateful for what I have, because seeing a friend that's struggling later in life with no immediate family and no support system, it is a lot harder for him.
Well, that sounds super positive. Let's take a U-turn.
Okay.
So, with your progression, obviously things may look a little bit more bleak. What is your outlook on the future of your condition? Obviously, we know where this is going to end up. How do you do that?
Well, because this is an honest interview, my future outlook is despair and discouragement. I know it's only going to get worse. I know I'm going to lose more and more stuff. You're going to ask this question eventually. I'll touch on it here. We watch the pharmaceutical companies very close. Back in 2018, FSHD was approved under the Orphan Drug Act, basically meaning that, and there's only like, I think one out of every 8,000 people that are affected. So pharmaceutical companies don't want to make drugs for this. The market is not there. But when they are accepted under the Orphan Drug Act by the federal government and they got federal funding available, ooh, that turns them on real quick. We can use federal funds. So in 2018, a bunch of companies got on board for the first time and said, we're going to work on this. And that is very uplifting to hear something like that for the future. Of those companies, 3 of them are really in the forefront. One was Fulcrum. They just finished their 3-phase human study and came up and said, it's not working. So then the whole community of FSH people are just like, what a belly drop. This is horrible. Avidity is still going strong. It could be that they have success. We'll see, because they're in human trials now. I think they're phase 2. But even if they are successful, they got to go through phase 3. Then the FDA has to come in, and that could take years. They could try to fast track it. But when I look at it, I'm thinking to myself, there's not going to be anything for 5 years. And we're talking treatments here. We're not talking cures. Nobody out there is even close to a cure. When I was diagnosed, they told me that by the time I had children, there'd be a cure. My children have now had children, and there is no cure, and there is no treatment. The cure would be, hey, give you an injection. You don't even have to worry about it, right? But that isn't there. So the treatments are out there, and hopefully will stop, like I told you before, the production of this DUX4, that it'll shut that down so that the muscle protein will not be killed off. There's a study in New Zealand that's extremely strong. They're actually started human trials in July, and they believe, and it's University of Auckland, I believe, they believe it's going to shut this down. So that if they are really believing that this is true, then there might be something from them in 3, 4, 5 years. But as I said before, I'm in despair, because where am I going to be in 5 years? I really believe that I'll be totally wheelchair bound. And then I worry about the final part, which is just being an invalid, just laying there. And that's, you can't predict the future with this. You can't know. And the doctors always tell me, you don't know that. But I just watch my progression and I gauge it. And I can tell what I'm losing, and I can tell about when I'm going to lose the next battle. Like next year, I really believe that 150 feet I'm walking is going to go away. And so the drug companies are not going to be there in time for me. That's my belief. I have no proof of that, but that's my belief. So I got a lot of despair and discouragement from that. And it's hard, but again, you got to play the cards you've been dealt. So here's what I got. This is what I'm going to run with, and I'm going to give it everything I got. My wife keeps telling me, John, you know, the big fallback is, although you're not a big cruiser, we could do cruises and you could be in your chair and you could go excursions and do things. And of course, then the more bad stuff starts coming. Well, you know, then I'm going to have a urine collection bag on my leg. I'm going to have to not eat so I don't have to get to a restroom, you know, where I have to have assistance from my wife to get onto the toilet. Corey Lee, I told you about him before. When he flies, there is no restroom for people in wheelchairs. So he starves himself 48 hours before a trip so he doesn't have to poop on the plane. And yeah, he's got, you know, a urine collection bag there. And so he just has to kind of go through that for the entire flight. But the rascal flies to Tokyo, flies to Australia, flies around the world, kind of puts up with that. And that's him playing the cards he's been dealt. So even though, like I say, there's a lot of discouragement, despair and all that, you still say, I'm going to have a positive mental attitude and I'm going to keep pushing, even if it means being in a wheelchair and doing a cruise and puttering around with my joystick. It's not where I want to be, but if it's what I've got, it's what I'm going to do.
Well, you rest assured that we will still love you.
Well,
and I will volunteer to change out your colostomy bag.
Oh my gosh. If that isn't a friend, I don't know what is. That's got to be the worst. I also want to throw out too, as we're talking about drug therapies, Roche Pharmaceuticals is out there. They're trying to do muscle replacement. They thought, oh, this is great. There's been some myoblast attempts in the past, injecting immature muscle cells, hoping that they'll grow. Also stem cell stuff. None of that is really raising any eyebrows, but they are working it. I mean, if you look at my arm, you'll notice here, it kind of sags a little bit down here. That's all just dead muscle collecting and such. And what they were hoping is, oh, we could inject like immature muscle cells or whatever, and then start muscle replication. So that's still going on. Whether it'll go someplace or not remains to be seen. But it would be incredible if you could regenerate lost muscle. That would, even if you couldn't stop muscle dying, if you could do muscle replacement.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hope that works out.
All right, we're getting towards the end of this, baby. Is there anything that you wish that more people understood about your condition?
I did write down a couple of good things. It is a 24/7 for me. So you would think, well, you go to bed, you're not using muscles, you should be free from this. But as it turns out, when your muscles are sore and you're pushing them onto the mattress, they hurt. I think typically I'll spend an hour or two in the bed and then I'll spend the rest of the night in the recliner. So I think people need to know that this thing hammers at you 24 hours a day. And so it's not like you get any relief from it. It impacts every part of my life, everything that I do, even sitting in this chair. You say, well, you're not doing anything, but the muscles are dying in my neck. And my neck gets tired at the end of the day holding my head up. And some people with bad FSH, it's like this. They can't even hold it up anymore during the day. So everything I do requires energy. And it, like I say, it does lead to frustration and fatigue, steals my balance. It is very frustrating. And this is where the awareness is so important, that when you're out in public, that you have some respect's not the word I'm looking for, but you have some recognition of people with limited mobility. I never did when I was growing up. I was an awful person. I probably did bad things, but it really is challenging to be in public. And so when people make it more challenging, it's hard. And that's where the awareness is important. So I go into a public bathroom in my wheelchair. there's only one wheelchair stall. I'll wait. And then out comes this young able-bodied person. Now, he still may have a hidden colostomy bag somewhere, but I am saying in my head, oh my gosh, why couldn't have you used the stall right next to you that was open? Why did you use the handicap stall? Because now I'm waiting on you. And from what I see, you didn't need it. And that kind of is hard when you're out in public. It's 2 days ago, we had our wheelchair van out. Just got a wheelchair van. We went to Lowe's and we pull up and we see a parking space. And the handicap parking space is open, but the grid lines for the chair, the guy has parked into those grid lines. I physically cannot take my wheelchair out without running into his car. I don't have the physical space. And I asked myself, why would somebody do that? Why would somebody park over and purposely cut off that access? Or why is it that I go to a doctor's office and I need that handicapped spot and they're all taken and I'm waiting for one? And again, you can't always judge from seeing, but I see able-bodied people getting out of their car, walking into the building, and they're doing just fine. And I asked myself, why? Is it they had something and they got the placard and the something went away, or what? I don't know. But that's a frustrating situation, because now I have to say, I have to have my wife with me, and she has to drop me at the door because there aren't any handicapped spaces available. And I'm guessing some of those that are there aren't being used by people who are currently handicapped. And so that is kind of a thing. Roll-in showers at a hotel. We don't think about handicap rooms, but they have them, but they're hard to get. They do book up. Having a roll-in shower is important. I've already had one occurrence where I fell in the shower. I believe that was a concussion moment. I was bleeding from my forehead and such. And I've learned I need to stay out of tubs in hotel rooms. Another time, this was a great story. They said our handicap room has a seat for you to sit on, and it's got a tub. And I thought, okay, that's something. So I'm sitting on the seat, and there wasn't any adhesive ducts, strips on the tub. And so when I stood up, I slowly slid into the tub. And I'm not hurt, but I can't get out. And the shower is still going. And I can't get out, and I'm trying to get out. I don't have the physical ability to get up off the floor, especially in a tub, and I'm trapped. And there's no pull cord. And my cell phone is over there on the sink. I'm trapped. What is going to happen? How's this going to play out? Now, my buddy's waiting for me at the trail. Eventually, he's going to come to the hotel, and he's going to say, hey, he's in room whatever. And maybe they'll come and find me, assuming that I haven't drained the entire hot water tank of the hotel, and I got freezing cold water coming out. I don't know. It took everything I had to get out of the tub and get fallen onto the floor. But at least now I was out of the tub. And so eventually, yes, I did get up, I did get dressed, and I did meet my buddy, and I said, what would you have done? He said, after half an hour, I would have come to the hotel. So I'm kind of timing that, thinking, oh my gosh, how long would I have stayed in that tub? So I really, if I have to have a tub anymore, I'll either carry a bath mat or I'll lay a towel down in there for traction or whatever. And I think that's part of the awareness that people need to have, so that I guess when you're in public and it's already really difficult for you, that people would say, I need to kind of honor or whatever those things that are intended for you, save those for you. In a hotel, I asked if they had a roll-in shower. They said, yeah, we do. It's already reserved out. I said, is the person handicapped? No, they're not. But that's the room that was available, and that's the room we gave them. I said, but there was other rooms empty, right? Yeah. So it's those things that I say that I wish there was more awareness, so that people would take the things that are available to those who are handicapped and I guess kind of just leave them for handicapped people. I guess if that makes any sense.
Makes sense to me, and I agree 100%.
Okay, all right.
All right. Final question. It's Final Jeopardy. What advice would you give to someone who is newly diagnosed with FSHD?
There's two really good websites. One's the FSHsociety.org, FSHDsociety.org, and that is a group of people, and their goal is to help you in every way they can. A lot of times you'll get doctors who don't understand this and don't tolerate it. I've seen the stories, and that's horrible. So you can go to the FSH Society, and they can help you find the correct doctors and specialists that you need, people that understand this. There's also an FSH Navigator site. You can Google that and find it pretty easily. And they do the same thing, except for they answer the phone. So you can actually call and talk to a live person and say, I'm having trouble getting a wheelchair, or I'm having trouble finding a doctor, whatever. And they've got the smarts to be able to help find out where you are and vector you to where you need the help. That's brand new. That just came out within the last year. And I stop and think about that. Gosh, if we had that back when I was 17, that would be pretty incredible. It really would. But I also jotted down on a note here too. I got to find it now. It's going to be on the last page. No, I think maybe I did cover. Oh, so the other part is in this, I think you also have to see not the bad of the disease, but you need to see the good. It's hard to find the silver lining in this, but it is there. A quick story. Terry and I were heading from the car to go into Five Guys, and I'm hobbling on my cane, and it's a struggle. And I know I'm going to be out of breath when I get to the counter. This is just, there wasn't a handicap space. And there was a guy. I saw him out of the corner of my eye, and I know how people are. And they are going to try to get in front of you in line. That's what people do. And now he's quickened his pace. And I just have to let him get in front of me. He's going to beat me. I should have gotten in line before him. I was out of my car first. And I'm kind of grousing about that. And I get to the door, and remember, I can't look up. I'm looking at the asphalt. And right when I get to the door to look up to go in, he's there holding the door for me. Blew me away. And wow, that just hit me so hard. And I thanked him. I said, you changed my day. Thank you. Terry and I went in. Eventually, it was our turn to order. She says to him, you go first. You should have been in line in front of us. No, you go right ahead. We watch on the news every day of all the horrible things that happen, and we focus on those. But there is a lot of good that goes on right around us, and we just don't know it. We just don't see it. Because of me being handicapped, disabled, I get to see examples of that all the time. People who would never look twice at me in public are there trying to help me. And there's a lot of good in people. And I think it's important that despite all the despair and such, that we hold on to that, because there's a lot of people out there that will help you as well. You'll learn empathy in this. I was horrible with empathy. I just never had it growing up. But now I have incredible empathy. Somebody comes up to me and says they've got tumors in their brain, or they've been diagnosed with blood cancer or whatever. I can feel it in my stomach when I hear stuff from people like that, because I've kind of been a man who's passed through the flame myself. So I feel for their struggle and their suffering. I have incredible empathy that I didn't have before. I have strength that I didn't have before. Not only have I battled FSH, but I'm still battling cancer. And we've had some scary times in our battle with cancer. But I think what happens is you come out of that with an inner strength that you never had before. You're a lot stronger than you were, and you're a lot stronger than you know. and you kind of find that strength in your journey. I think there's a joy in still being alive. My doctor had a letter from the doctor in Kentucky that diagnosed me. He wouldn't let me see it. And I would ask for it, and he wouldn't let me see it. Finally, that doctor retired, and a new doctor came in, and I asked to see that letter. And the doctor said, sure, yeah, it's your letter. You should see it. So he gave it to me. And it basically said Exodus in midlife. So I would die somewhere in my mid-50s. And I was told that, and I believe that. And I think that's an important takeaway, is doctors have only knowledge about things that they can see. They can't predict the future. They don't know what the real story is. I outlived the mid-50s. My cousin was 63 when he died. I outlived him as well. And there's a certain amount of joy that you feel in that you are alive, that you're still going, that it hasn't taken you. You hear people say that any day I can get out of bed and put both feet on the floor is a good day. And that's a very important part kind of to take from this, is you're still out there. It may be a fight, but hey, you're still there doing the fight. And there's strength and joy in that as well.
Perfect. I was going to give you an opportunity to have famous last words, but I think those are good.
Well, actually, I'd like to say before that, because I did touch on how I got the FSH, and I did touch on the fact that 2 daughters had it, and then they passed it on to their children. And so then an important question to ask is, how about my children? So I have 3 children. So how have they fared in this as well? Because it's a 50-50 coin flip. My daughter Laura got tested. She was sure she had it, and she got tested, did the DNA test. Incidentally, I did DNA testing in 2014, which confirmed everything as well. So she got DNA tested, nothing, okay? So now I have a daughter, Ann, and a son, John. How about them? They haven't ever been tested. We chose not to test them because at that point of time, the rule was if you get into medical stuff with a pre-existing condition, they don't want to address that. Those days are over, fortunately. I guess that was the Obama regime that came in and put a stop to that nonsense. So now you can have a pre-existing condition, and the insurance companies have to accept you. So we didn't test our second 2 children because we believed that could knock them out for jobs in the future. And then once they got into their field, then if they wanted to get tested, they could. But my symptoms started at the age of 10. They were pretty big at the age of 17. We do watch our children, and we've never seen them exhibit any symptoms whatsoever. So either they are incredibly lightly affected or they didn't get it. If there's a 50-50 chance and you have 3 kids, one of them's got to have it, right? But in the case of my mom, 50-50 chance, and we believe both kids had it. So it's a genetic coin flip. It's always 50-50 with each kid, and you might run through all your children and never have the problem, but it's a thing that we also then watch in our grandsons. Will our grandsons be affected? Could, daughter Ann be lightly affected and we just don't know it? And then it pops up in our grandsons. So we watch stuff like that kind of close. It's an important part in this. They now have a saliva test. You don't have to do the blood test. Now they do a spit test as well. So it's pretty easy to kind of get yourself tested that you would know. But we feel pretty blessed in our case that 50-50 chance, 3 kids, 0. I mean, what a blessing that is. That's incredible. And we thought long and hard about that when we were doing our family planning. My sister thought long and hard about it, and there's another story behind that, and I won't bore you with it, but it affects even the area of family planning. And maybe instead I want to adopt or not have children at all. My mother made the statement at some point that she wishes she had never had me, because she knew the pain and the struggle and the shortened lifespan, and she would never want her kids to go through that. Turns out she didn't have the ability to make that choice. And I think today, if she was looking on me, she'd feel today pretty good about her choice.
Well, I think you're pretty great.
Well, good. Good.
Well, thank you for sitting and being interrogated.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. You got follow-on questions, just let me know.